Okay, now we're going to do Simonim 455 to 459. This is Tough Nun Hey to Tough Nun Tes. We're getting further in the laws of Pesach, and this is Orach Chaim Tur. Ein Loshen Elav Mayim Shalanu. One does not need matzah except for Mayim Shalanu, which is water that rested. Rashi lav dafka Shalanu laila achas. Rashi says not specifically mean it went over an entire night. Ella she'avar aleihem yud beishais shenisviru. Only it rested for at least 12 hours. Lefi perish hara, and according to the Ra, mimet tzarech shalai yihu b'mechubar shemichnas laila. According to the explanation of the Rav means, it must be that they cannot be attached to the ground once night begins. In other words, you have put it in a basin, it's no longer in running water, or it's no longer in a well, it's no longer attached to anything else, and it stays there for over the night, or for 12 hours. Because at night the springs are heated. I want to draw from them in the evening and sunset, they are permitted immediately. Kasav Adeni Avirash, V'chein Ama Davar L'Shoivin Beinash Mashos. The Torah's father Rush says, so it's common practice to draw them at twilight. V'ima Eisu Cham Yashmiyam B'Teres Shu Kar. And at the time when the water is hot, he should place them in a cellar which is cool. V'ima Eis Kar Yinichur Ba'avir Ki Hamachrav Hucham. And if the time is cold, you should leave them in the air because the cellar is warm. The main thing is we want to get them not too cold, and we don't want to get them too hot. We need them lukewarm. Lukewarm is the best water for making matzah. Kasaf Rashi, V'shuvas Ein Loshen Ella B'mayim Shalanu. Rashi wrote, one needs only with these rested waters. Shechashu Chachamim L'Roiv Ayarois She'ein Lahem Ella Mi Bayrois Avenais Shehein Roischim. Because the sages said that we're concerned that for that most towns which only have well water and spring water which is warm, the Yerim Midwarav Shimai Naharais Ein Lachash, and it appears from his words that with the river water there is no concern. V'chal Makaim Ein Lahakel. Nevertheless, we should not be lenient. Ella Af. Be made harais im lolosh ella im kein lanu. Rather, with the river water, one should not need unless they have rested. V'chein yira milasha and bahag, and this is so forth. It's the bahag she'enoi mechalek, and this is Hag was one of the Gaonim that he says also does not distinguish between water where it came from. Shekasav v'lai mibai b'mayim de parishe de aser the milash bahu. He wrote, not only lukewarm water is forbidden to knead with, ella afilu b'mayim nahara damu aser lashad bahu ad the v'yasi, that river water that was drawn during the day is forbidden to knead with it until it rested. The Isha Loi Salash Bechamin. A water should not knead with hot water. Afil Loi Nazachu Ella Bechama. Even if they are heated only by the sun. V'loy Mayim Harukve Min Hamluyar. And not with water drawn from a boiler. Vehu Dod Gadol Shenoichstai Ava Vitalai Al Mokamesh, which is a large kettle whose copper is thick and it hangs over a fire. In other words, we know what it is. We know that it's used for baths or used for soup. And the water in it remains warm even when there's no fire underneath it. V'im avra v'lasha bahen, and if she transgressed and she actually needed with them, according to the Rif, asra afilu b'mayim shaloi lanu, even with waters that it did not rest, it's forbidden. V'chein kasav bal hag v'aritz giyas. The Bahag says this in the Ritz giyas. Rashi dafka b'chamin u'mchame chama. But according to Rashi, typically with hot water and sun-heated water, avamayim shaloi lanu, bedivar shasharoy, but water that did not rest after the fact, bediavad sharoy, he allows it permitted after the fact. Afilu lachvila, even initially sharoy lemelash mahu I lekachrina, and even initially he allows it if you don't have any other water. It's best if it rests and it stays at a certain room temperature. and not too cold, not too hot. But if it you don't have any other water, this is what you're going to use. Iskim harash, and so too, the Rush says the same thing. V'ha dasrinan bavara v'lasha pirosh avi ezri dafka b'mezid. And that which is forbidden, which he needed, Avi Ezri explains, only if he did it on purposely. Aval shagig shari. But if he did it unintentionally, then it's fine. She took water. She thought it was water that was rested, or she didn't know that to have rested. Then afterwards, it's fine. Rashi Asar Afilu Shagig. Rashi says even unintentionally, it's still not good. And he further explains that it's forbidden to even to eat due to concern that it came chametz because of the water, because it wasn't made from the rest of the water. Even if he intended to only eat kazayis matzah afterwards, the gara b'miksais shel akum, because it is worse than those that are made for someone who doesn't really know the laws about making the Pesach dough. The Haritzkias, according to the Ritzkias, Baliter, and then Baliter, Kasav Dafka de Matzah Mishumeris. It's specifically, this is only for Shmur Matzah. When you're making Shmur Matzah, this is what the water is for. V'chein Mayim Shaloilanu Dafka La Matzah Shmura. And likewise, water that did not rest applies specifically to Shmur Matzah. Aval Achila Shari, but for eating it is permitted. Daha Kail Betzika Shel Akom Adam Mamle Krisa Bahen, and we hold that with those that are made by non-Jews, a person may fill his stomach with them. Ubavad Shoyichal Kazayis Matzah Barchain, provided that he eats a Kazayis of matzah at the end. The Harash Hiskem Leperush Rashi, and the Rashi agrees with what Rashi said. Lasura Afilu Shageg Vafilu Bachila. He says that it's forbidden even if it's unintentional, even if it's for eating. Vaharbe Noigin Shaloi Litain Milach Bepas Bepesach. Many of the custom not to put salt on bread on Pesach. And this is what the custom is in Ashkenaz. We don't put salt on bread. We don't put salt on matzah. The ein tam bar l'asr, but there's no clear reason to say it's asr. Ein l'shanois mishum al titoi toirasi mecha. Nevertheless, one should not change because we not abandon the customs of our mother, our forefathers. The Yeshayim Shabalayla Rishayna Ein Litain Ba Melach Misham Matzah Ashira. Some say that on the first night one should not put salt because of Matzah Ashira, because you don't want it to be like a rich matzah. It's supposed to be like a matzah oni, it's to be a poor matzah, Gamze Einoi. But this is also not correct. Shanira, because Sheinoi Nikrak, it's not called Ashira, it's not called a rich matzah. Ella Shloshayna B'yayin V'shemen V'dvash. Only when it's needed with wine, oil, or honey. Aval melach enoi mashira, but what salt does not make it matzah ashira. Therefore, if you want to put salt in the dough, or you want to put salt on the matzah afterwards, it's not going to be considered a matzah ashira, a rich matzah. Garsinan b'menachos tefillah, and we learn in menachos that regarding tefillah, seasoned matzah. Pirosh lash matzah bekemach v'shumshumin b'chol minei tavlin kshera. Meaning one needs into the matzah with nagila, sesame seed, or all kinds of spices. It is still kosher. Kevan sheish ba tam matzah. So since it still has a tam of the taste of matzah. V'kosav b'sefer harakeach, and it's written in the sefer harakeach. M'kol makom ein litain ba pilpulin. One should not put pepper in it. Lefi shehu chad mecham isa, because it's sharp and it heats the dough, and also can make it chametz before the time. So it seems like that there is a separation between making matzah for the night of the Seder and also matzah for the rest of the year, for the rest of the Pesach. And it seems like the matzah shalanu is really for the shmura matzah, which is for the Seder, whereas if you like in his words, it seems like he's machmer and says we shouldn't just have any other matzah throughout Pesach, but the whole point of Shalanu is really regarding to to make sure that the dough does not become chametz before its time. So really the point is that any dough that you make into any sort of thing on Pesach or before Pesach, you should make sure that it's done with this rested water. Now we are on. Oh, I am. I think. One second. I have a little bit off. Sorry, I forgot to reset this before I started. Okay, where are we? I gotta get to the right place. Okay, now we're going to talk about making for the further making mixing dough on Pesach. Shir ha'isa shel Pesach. The measure of dough for Pesach, shalashina, when it's needed, bepam achas, in one time, is he mem gimel beitzim. It's 43 eggs worth. V'chaimish beitza b'ainos, and a fifth of an egg of an average size. So 43 and a half eggs of an average size worth of dough. So you take, let's say, whatever it is, it's about an ounce and a half an egg or something. So talking about that amount of dough. V'chein yishar oisa, and one should measure it. Yimale kli b'mayim v'itein oisa l'tzoich kli reikon. And you should fill a vessel with water and place it into an empty vessel. The mem gimel beitzim ba'anachas achad yachas, and insert into them 43 eggs, one after the other. It's interesting. This is how he's measuring them with displacement. Va'amayim hayotzim kli hamachazkim oisam hu shir hamida, and the water that overflows the vessel that holds its measure. Yimale kli mayim, or you fill the vessel with water. V'yara mayim mimenu kli acher, and then you pour the water from another vessel. And afterwards you place in it the 43 eggs. And you turn water to it that had been poured out. And the water that remains over is the measure. So in other words, displaced water. So you know, you cover a vessel full of water, and you put all the water under it, and then you put the eggs in it, and all the water that gets displaced, that's the amount that is being displaced by the water. That's a measure for the water to fill up this dough. And this method is better because one cannot be precise when placing eggs into it while it's full. So he has his two ways of measuring it. One way is, like I said, putting in the vessel when it's full of water and then having it all displaced. The other one is you fill the vessel with water and pour water from it from another vessel, and afterwards place into it your eggs, and then return it to the water that he had poured out, and the water that remains over the measure. So then the water that remains over the measure, then you have the difference. That's how you know it is. So it's a little complicated in using a little bit scientific method here, trying to figure out what the amount of the 43 and a half eggs are. V'chasav Rav Yitzchak Barav Yehuda Shalai Hamida he Dafka L'Rishayna Shatanurim Haya Ktanim, and he says that the measure applies typically to the early generations whose ovens were very small. Ve'ika Demechash Bechal Isa L'Chamchamchay, that the concern that any dough that might become heated. Avaturim Shalanu Shehem Gedolim Adif, and our ovens that are bigger and they're better and even more so our ovens, that shouldn't be the cap. V'hi Asukim beisa tamid shalai tavai lidei chimutz, and they should remain constantly occupied with the dough so that it does not become chametz. And if you ever watch the way matzah is made in a matzah factory, it's really unbelievable. It really takes about 4 to 4.5 minutes from pouring in the water to the matzah comes out of the oven. The water goes into the flour, mix, made into dough. Given to the other person who beats the dough, then rolls the dough, separates the dough into different pieces. Everyone gets their own little piece, separates the dough, roll, put the little the peg circle in it, a peg wheel in it that gets the holes, and then you put it on the stick, throw it into the oven, come out of the oven, 4 minutes from beginning to end. It's really amazing. Aval, and so therefore they shouldn't leave the dough, so it shouldn't become chametz. V'loi haidu lechaver, but his colleagues did not agree with him because of Harabi ben Yoina. Hecha shalosh yoser mizeh shashir chachmei tzerfas hayu oisher noisay. Rabbi Yoina wrote that what needed more than this measure, the rabbis of France forbid it. V'nerali lahater, and to me it seems like it should be permitted. Miyu ladas hagainim shekusfu latchila elaniach isa afilu rega achas b'lai isa. However, according to the Gaonim, who wrote that initially one should not leave the dough even for a monetary moment with that activity. If so, initially one should not need more than this for this measure because you're not going to be able to do it yourself. This is according talking to someone who does it himself. If you do with a team, you can do much more dough at one time because with the team, everyone's going to take their own piece of dough and it's not going to be left alone. And the Tur's father, the Rush, was agreed with this. Ein moedin kemach b'yom tov lolosh. One should not measure flour on Yom Tov in order to knead it. Or b'yom tov shel Pesach and the you shouldn't measure on Yom Tov. It's one of the things that we shouldn't do on Yom Tov. Or Shabbos, and obviously can't bake bread on Shabbos. So it's not talking about Shabbos, but you can't. The measuring is one of those the works you can't do on a holiday. Ubiyam Tov Pesach, and specifically the holiday Pesach, Aser Lalosh Yoser Measira Nikach Ba'omed Hadas. It's forbidden to need more than Isaram he should take by estimation. V'lo yarbe al isaron, should not exceed in isaron. It's a small amount because if you deal with more than a little bit of dough at a time, dough get lost. You get little pieces, and then all of a sudden you have chametz in your house. So definitely don't have it for Pesach. And be very careful, obviously, if you're going to make dough on Pesach. But most people, I think, do not make dough on Pesach. All matzah we make, first of all, we buy because it's very hard to make it at home. You have to do it very fast. It has to be super clean instruments, and it has to be done within a very short period of time, 18 minutes or less. We know that, and it has particular laws regarding the water and the dough and everything else. So it's easier just to buy it. If you insist and want to make your own matzah at home, do it before Pesach. Don't do it on Pesach. On Pesach, you can run into definite problems. Don't even have flour on Pesach. Put away any unused flour for Pesach because flour hanging around is just a recipe for disaster, pun intended. Now we are up to Taf Nun Zayin, 457. Because one has to be precise in measuring of the dough, so that he does not increase the concern of making it leaven or chametz. Mituv shimalit ba is preferable that he reduce his recipe. L'chein toiv l'kara v'isa yachad b'shas hafrashas challah. Therefore, it's good to bring the dough together at the time of separating challah from it. Challah is a little portion that has to go to a kohen. These days, we either burn it or we bury it because we don't have a kohen that is sanctified that's going to eat it in Jerusalem. Deshema yesh bahen shalai haya ba shiur. Less than that, a portion not have required. V'im lo yifresh min isa. If you not separate the challah from the dough, yisaneim b'sela. You should place them into a basket. Vasela yisrem challah. And then you combine them, and then you could go ahead and take challah from it after that. And by the way, this could happen during the whole year round. This is not only for Pesach. If you're making challah over a certain amount, 43 eggs, and amount is about 5 pounds of flour, that's the minimum that's required to then take the challah out of it. So if you're making 5 pounds of flour at a time, you take the challah portion a little knip after the dough is made. So again, if you forget, you could put things back together and you combine them. If you're making smaller dough amounts, let's say only making like 1 or 2 loaves, and you're doing a smaller amount, if you want to take challah, you combine it with other challahs, and you could that didn't have challah taken out of it, and then you could take it as well. V'im yadu shahaya be'isa shiur challah, and if it's known that the dough had the required measurement for the challah, to take the little tip for the challah, v'shachach lafrisha challah ad la'achar be'afiyah, but you forgot, and you didn't take it till after you baked. Afilu Saruf sal ein tzarach. Combining in the basket is not necessary. Ella yikrav kal hakikaras yachad. You bring all the loaves together. Vital miachad al kulam. You take from one for all of them. Afilu im shachach ve'achal mixas. Even if you forgot and he ate some, yifresh al amoiter, then he separates what from what remains. The chala chutza aretz, and chala outside of Eretz Yisrael anyway. Oichel v'haylech v'achar kachem fresh. One may eat it and then he can separate afterwards. Because it's only a rabbinic decree, so then you don't have to be separated before. Obviously, initially you should do separate before, because that's the way it's done, and you should do it the same way it's done at Yisrael in the land of Israel as done outside the land of Israel. But if you just know that if you are making challah, it can always be taken after it's been baked. But again, initially it's better to take it before it's baked, even according to Torah. Halash isa b'yam tov oishal pesach u'makam she'ein kayin. One who needs dough on, not requires, but like needs dough on Yom Tov Pesach in a place where there's no kohen. V'lo yikra l'chala shem ad ta'ena, and he should not designate as chala until it is baked. She'im yikra la. Because then what is going to happen is if you're doing dough on Pesach, you take the challah out. What do you do with it? It's going to become chametz. You can't do anything with it now. Now it's for sure going to become chametz. Now you're going to have chametz left on in your counter because you do this mitzvah. So the best thing to do is bake it and take it afterwards, because then you can take it from the matzah and now it's not chametz. Shem yikra la shame la yehi rashai la afos, because if he designated it, he will not be permitted to bake it, right? Because once you doesn't take it, you can't bake it. Kevan shein kan misharoy, since there's no one here who it's fit, so therefore you can't bake it according to him. Simin achenu kol atachmetz, and if he leaves it like that, it'll become chametz. Ve'en rashai l'srafa, and he is not permitted to burn it because it's special for a kohen. She'ain surfing kachim b'yom tov, because we don't burn kachim on Yom Tov. Now, during the rest of the week, I think we do burn it, but we don't burn kachim on Yom Tov. Hilkach lo yikrula shem ad sham achar afia. Therefore, you should not designate any challah if you're making a large thing on Yom Tov Pesach until after it's baked. The az yitzara fakal b'salab. He buys everything into a basket. V'yifresh achas alkol, and then he takes one for all the matzahs that he made. V'im shachach v'kara la sham, and if you got it already designated it over there, yatlanu l'tzaynim, he should place it into cold water immediately. V'az loy tachmetz, then it will not become chametz. If you put the dough into freezing cold water, it's not going to leaven. Avil mokam she'ein sham kayin katan shalai roya kri miyav. In a place where there's no young kayin who has never, let's say a young kohen who is too young to have ever come tamei, ayafilu gadol sharoya kari v'tava lekroiv, or even an adult, but he had gone to a mikvah, yachol lekrois la sham. He could designate challah if nisharoy aloi al yidei shavtlenu b'roiv, because it is fit for him by nullifying it with the majority. Vaychlenu b'mei tumas, and he may eat it even in a state of tumah, even though he's still tamei, he still could eat it in that state of tumah. So it's interesting. The Tur says that regular challah, even after there's no Beis Hamikdash, you still give to a kohen, and you still allow the kohen to eat it. The challah shnia and the challah is la kohen, and the secondary challah, which is eaten by a kohen, he should separate it and bake it like he does the rest of the year. And it's permitted for a kohen to eat it alone in a state of tumah. And some of the Gaonim wrote that even chal ha'or one may designate and bake. Even places no kohen. Kevon the Chazyale Ima Isa, since it would be fit for him if you were present, Amrinon Hayil Karbe the Amar Hayil, and for we say since it would be if for presence, so Allah follows Rabbi who says that since it might be for present, if he's not present, we still do the same thing. Just in case, let's say one we're going to come to town, maybe who knows, a Kohen will come to town that day, or he's a guest from somewhere you didn't know, and now you have a Kohen there. Umutav shalai likrois la sham ella im kain yesh kain ba'ir, but it is preferable not designated unless you know that there's a kohen in the city. lefuke nafshe miflukta, in order to remove yourself from any sort of dispute on the law. So again, if you're going to make challah on Pesach, obviously not making a challah, you're taking challah from dough and you're going to make it into matzah. So you take it after you bake it, and if you want to give it to a Kohen, you could give it to a Kohen, but the Kohen's going to, again, you have to give it right away because you have to make sure that it's not going to go chametz before the Kohen is able to bake it. So if that's not going to be the case, then you bake it, you give it, and take away a little piece. That's what you do. I don't know that all other authorities say we give it to a Kohen these days, because I think they disagree that he can eat it in his tummy. But according to Tur, he's still able to eat it when he's tummy, so you still would give it to a Kohen. Best thing, again, is please do not just bake, put the flour away. Put your flour away for Pesach. Make sure you have all your matzah before Pesach. And best thing is buy the matzah, because then you know that it was done, at least, you've done it properly. So you're relying on someone who's done properly. Do it in your house. You don't know where the dough's getting. You don't know if you cooked it properly in your home oven, kasher your home oven, whatever it is. All these other problems that can happen. Anyway. Ein maskilin les asek bepas ba'arba aser ad achar sheisha. One does not begin to engage in making bread on the 14th until after the midday. Ve'isa b'shuva masei bi'echad she'afa matzais kaidem arbe shais. Let's just get to we're up to 4 of 8. And it is brought in the Chuvas, in the responsum, that an incident with someone who baked matzah before 4 hours, ukvar ba'ar chamtzai, and he already destroyed his chametz, v'asar rabbeinu matzah, and Rabbi forbade the matzah, d'shakik Pesach, because it's compared to like a carbon Pesach. The Chevan, the Pasak, Eino Nishkat, Ela Mishei Shah Sumaila, and since the carbon Pesach was only slaughtered from the 6th day and onwards, Af Matzah Kain, so too regarding Matzah. Av Rabbeinu Eliezer, Agadol, Rabbeinu Shmuel, Akayin Hitiru, but they allowed it. Even initially, Yesh Lazar Misham Chaviva Mitzvah Bish Sasa, because it's someone who's very careful in the mitzvah and it's beloved to him and doesn't want to do it in the proper time. Vavi Ezri Hevi Taisefta, and the Avi Ezri brought it to Sefta. Yetze B'Matzah Yeshana B'Vaj She Yesnoi L'Shem Pesach, that one may fulfill the obligation with old matzah provided he made it for the sake of Pesach. Vakasa of the Yushalmi, so too says the Talmud Yushalmi. Paleg Asosefta va'Oiser Afilu Sha'asosol L'Shem Pesach, who disagrees with the Sefta and forbids it even if it was made for the sake of Pesach. The Kavan Yushalmi Oiser, and since the Talmud Yushalmi says it's not allowed, it's prohibited. Roy La'achmir Shaloi Lasos Kodim Chatzos. It is proper to stringent, do not make it before midday. Mishas Hatchak, but in a time of extra need, Shalai Yimtzu Le'efos Leil Matzoi Shabbos Mishom Chag Ha'akum, and the time of pressing need, when they will not be able to make matzah on Matzah Shabbos, because let's say it's they were not able to do it. It's non-Jewish. And he says it's a non-Jewish festival. I'm not sure why they can't bake bread then. Maybe do some sort of decree back then, but whatever it is, for no reason they can't do it. Rayu lismoich al the sefta lahatir. You could rely on the sefta and it's okay. Mikam makam yasu shalosh matzahs below Pesach. Nevertheless, if one has 3 matzahs in each Pesach, b'shum chaviva matzah b'shasar, since matzah is beloved to him in its proper time. V'chenikos Rav Masna al Pesach shechal leis Shabbos. So too Rav Masya wrote regarding Pesach that falls on Shabbos. The first day falls on Shabbos. The Kaim Milan Ravir Nakal Bilfnai Shabbos Musharin Mozon Shtei Sudais, and we have a decree that we have a law that the one destroys everything before Shabbos and leaves food only for his 2 meals. V'lama ein Ravir Nakal Vayfa Matzah V'echel B'Shabbos K'dei La'azer Matzahs, and why do we not destroy everything and bake matzah and eat it on Shabbos to beautify the mitzvah? Shal achar Shamile Kuresai Nimenu Einai Mevarech Aleha, because after one fills his stomach with it, he does not recite a bracha on it anymore. Hilkach Al Taifa Matzah Ela Matzah Shabbos B'fnei Maris Ayin. Therefore, we did not bake matzah on Saturday night due to Maris Ayin, because of the evil eye. We're afraid people are going to say, "Oh, you're allowed to do it." You're not allowed to do it even initially. She'im atem oifim erev Shabbos. Acher mazon b'matzah. But for if you bake from before Shabbos, others will then belittle the mitzvah and be lenient with it as well. Afal pi, even though shemuter la'oifes be'erev Shabbos, even those permitted to bake it on the eve on Friday and eve of Shabbos, chalku v'hadru matzos ve'efu motzei Shabbos bizmanai. It's better for the mitzvah to bake in its proper time on Motzei Shabbos. V'yotza b'zeh ashir Rabbi Yehuda Koyin al shlu mahu la'efois matzah kishiros b'leil sheni me'erev Yom Tov. And similar, Rabbi Yehuda Koyin responded that when asked whether one may bake matzahs needed for the second night from before Yom Tov, the Heishiv Chaviva Mitzvah B'Shatzav Oifa B'Leil Sheni. He answered, a mitzvah beloved in its proper time, and they should bake it on the second night. So what the Torah is talking about is there was a custom then to bake your matzahs at home when you needed them. Not like we have these days where we prepare all the matzahs beforehand, but to make the matzahs when we needed them. The Rav Hai Kasav Minhag of Seinu Levar Chametz Me'er Shabbos Le'efod Matzah. And Rav Hai wrote that the custom of our ancestors it's to destroy chametz before Shabbos and then to bake the matzah. That's why we do it after the 6th hour, because we have to destroy all the chametz and then we can bake matzah. I'm not worried the matzah become chametz. Also not worried that we have to destroy any other parts of it. V'gadru kamitzu shalai lefois matzah me'er Shabbos shalai yavar lidei aser. The early authorities established a safeguard not to bake matzah before Shabbos, so as not to come to the permission of actually baking it on Shabbos. On Motzei Shabbos, oifei matzah of kitkuna, and on Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, they bake matzahs properly. V'anachnu ein lanu el minhag v'seinu lefois me'er Shabbos v'loi l'tzroach b'yom tov. And we have only the custom of our ancestors to bake before Shabbos and not to exert ourselves on Yom Tif of baking. And after eating the matzah, rather, we are dreaming makdim l'mitzvah. In other words, we don't want to delay the seder or delay anything else by starting to have to bake the matzah. So therefore, it's always good to have prepared before. And then the Rosh, the Torah's father, he used to destroy everything before Shabbos, leave food for the 2 meals, and bake matzahs also before Shabbos. And I saw in Barcelona that among that those people are very meticulous in commandments, that they would bake everything needed for the Yom Tov before. So that it doesn't come mixed in, and we don't even have a concern that there's going to be a permission of chametz. So at the very end of the line, he says that it's much better, obviously, to take care of all your matzah beforehand, like we do these days. Make sure you bake all your matzah before Pesach, because you don't want to have that it possibly can leave over in your house to be chametz on Pesach. And also, when are you going to bake it? You're going to bake it on the eve of the holiday. You're busy making the holiday. When are you going to make it? When are you going to clean? It's going to be too much. Obviously, these days, especially when we have these really hot ovens, much better to just obviously buy your matzah, and that's what we do these days. But he's talking about someone who wants to see about doing something that's like, right in the right time, and you have fresh matzah for the Seder. I also want to point out, his matzah was probably not our matzah. His matzah was probably the fresh lafa matzah. They did not have the hard cracker matzah until after the Middle Ages. That's when our thin cracker matzah, I call it. Not that it's from white people. I don't mean make a slur on white people. Fully, it was fine, and you're able to have softer matzah. We don't do these days. Most people don't do these days. Anyway, time gone by. This is the last one for today. This is Tough Nun Test. Ein lashon makam hashemesh. One should not knead dough in the place of the sun. And this is why we're talking about even before Pesach. Yamuna filu tachas kol avir rakia aser. On a cloudy day, even under the open sky, it's prohibited. Ve'al tikroi Haisha losh eitzel piatanor mifnei chaim hatanor, and also you should not knead in front of the mouth of an oven because of the heat that comes out of the oven. V'loi tagi yodeha, and you should not lift your hand minapas from the dough. Lahasiyas be'asa achar ad sheglois kol avas, and engage in another task until she finishes the dough. Once you start mixing the dough, mix it completely, and once you're kneading the dough, knead it completely. You don't start matzah and then do something else. The achila initially. Initially, if you require that he's not left without activity even for one moment. And as long as he's working on it the entire day, it does not become chametz. In other words, once you need it, you keep working on it, it will never become leavened. Asa shior mili have chametz, and if it's left without activity for a time of a mil, then it becomes chametz. That's what we told him, 18 minutes. A mil is about a mile, and it takes an average person about 18 minutes to walk a mile. So therefore, that became the time where they were afraid that if it's not worked on, then it becomes chametz. So therefore, that's why we try to do it from the mixing until the baking should all be within less than 18 minutes. But technically it doesn't have to be because you're working on it the entire time. But we're afraid that there's going to be a tiny part. You didn't work on it perfectly the entire time, or we left it a little bit. So that's why we try to do everything within the 18 minutes. And that's how it's done, actually. It's amazing. It's like I said, 4 minutes. Yeah. So... If they began with two doughs at once, and then it became chametz. It is known that the second one became chametz. Even if one did not see the signs that actually became leavened. And if it became leavened to the point where the cracks are in it, even if the cracks do not intersect one with the other. One crack is over here, one crack is over there. This is complete chametz. You eat it, you're going to get cut. The soul's going to get cut off. And if there's no cracks in its surface but it turned pale, this is chametz called noikshes, like putter. And anyone eats it, so it's exempt because it's permitted to eat it because it's not it's not real full chametz. But tzaricha sheina kelim shamayim. And if you require 2 vessels of water, achas, one of them from sekes boy, one which she smoothed the dough. Peiresh shaitzin by b'fnei acharada, meaning she spreads it and smooths it at the surface like on a cake. V'yachas, some says by yodeha, and one which she cools her hands. Kedei shalai tachusa isa, so that the dough does not become heated. The Rambam Kasav, and the Rambam writes, "V'im he lisha aifa v'tricha shnei kelim shalmayim," and the Rambam wrote that she's eating and baking, she requires 2 vessels of water. V'leidinu lama kasav lasha v'aifa. I do not know why he wrote kneading and baking. The aka isha she lasha kai, because it applies to any woman who is kneading. Ve'ilu hamayim im shar hamayim shroislin bahem havira shara kelim, that these waters together with the waters that used to wash an eating bowl and other vessels, loy tish kapim elav makam midron, should not be poured out except for in a slow place. Shloyis kablu makam echad v'hachmitzah. She doesn't gather one place and become chametz. Down the drain they go, or down the down on a slope, down into the dirt, down into the sewers, wherever it is. V'loishna im heim rav oimiyat. There's no difference whether it's little or a lot. Those waters, since they're used to cool the hands while you're working on the dough, so then that will come chametz, and that's got to be washed out.